Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome back to Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Do not be fooled by the fancy name. It's just me and some baseball cards. And today, it's special baseball cards and other items with things written on them. This is the Hall of Fame Autograph Show. So happy to have Kyle on as a guest. We'll bring him in shortly, but I just wanted to sort of set the stage here. When I first started talking with Kyle about this show, I was unsure how I was going to do it because I'm not really a Hall of Fame autograph collector, but it kind of ends up that I am. So I have a couple of Hall of Fame autographs. I have the Duke Snider card that I showed off on another show last week or a few weeks ago. But I also have the 1970 complete top set, which I've been working on autographs over the years. And when I completed the set in 2018, I started getting autographs of every player was the concept. And right now I'm about, 320. So I'm about a little less than halfway there. But what I did realize is that there's a ton of Hall of Famers in the 1970 top set. And so I do, in fact, have a Hall of Fame autograph collection, but nowhere near what we're going to see from Kyle. So let's just go through some of the ones that I do have. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So this is the page of Hall of Fame autographs that I got in person. Johnny Bench and Tony Perez were at the 2022 Atlantic City National Convention. Steve Carlton and Rod Carew, that's 3 cards there, were from the Westchester show in 2018 or 19. Tony Oliva was the Hofstra show, and Reggie Jackson was from a something called Pinstripe Pride. It's a show in northern Jersey. So all these were in person, which is, I guess, the best way to authenticate a photograph. Autograph. And the reason photograph is in my head is because when everybody signs for me, my best authentication, I think, is taking a photograph of the player signing the card. But we'll get into a little bit of that later. These are taken from what's called TTM, through the mail. Jim Cott, Jim Palmer, Mazeroski, there's Juan Marichal, Brooks Robinson, Fingers, and Cepeda. All of these required what's called a donation. Most of them were 10. I think Brooks was 60 for both cards. I think Orlando Cepeda was 20. But the TTM, a lot of the players that aren't Hall of Famers, you can get them to do it for free. But Hall of Famers, you pretty much have to put a donation in, $10, $20 most of the time. Now, these are also TTMs. And the reason I have these 4 gentlemen on their own page is because all 4 of them now have sadly passed away. The thing about collecting older Hall of Fame autographs is these people are human beings, and older human beings move on. And so Perry, I would say about 2 years after he signed this, he passed away. Negro and Sutton passed away right around the time that I got these autographs. But Kaline's the one that's kind of odd, is because that came in the mail, and about 2 days later, Mr. Kaline was announced as being passed away. So that might be it is one of the last autographs that he ever signed. And these are the third type of a way that I get autographs, which is purchasing. Now you'll see 3 of those have authentications. 2 of them JSAs, which come in little top loaders or front loaders with that little, it's like a sticky kind of thing that prevents the card from coming out. I broke them because I'll show you in a second where I keep my autograph collection. The Joe Torre was in a slab, a PSA slab. I cracked that out. As you can see, Lou Brock is still in the slab. I bought that at a show about, 2-3 weeks ago. That will eventually get cracked out. Shane Dienst, Yastrzemski, Billy Williams, and Aparicio were all purchases. I know Aparicio and Williams were from legitimate auction houses. They're not certified, but that's one of the issues we'll talk about. And then the other thing is Shane Dienst and Yaz were purchased from legitimate dealers, also not certified, but look pretty damn close to real autographs. So I took out all the cards themselves, but the reason that I cracked those out is because this is where 1970 autograph collection is. You see the paper in there is a lot of my authentication paperwork is in here, but this is the entire binder of 1970 set, and like I said, about 300 or so autographed. So enough about me. Um, Kyle is a autograph collector, Hall of Fame autograph collector, not necessarily cards, but you'll see some cards. Um, Absolutely awesome collection, and I'm so happy to have him on the show. So I just want to bring you in here for a sec, Kyle. How are you this
Hi,
morning?
Dan. I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
So I can see it's behind you.
Yep.
Well, not all of it, but some of it. And what we're going to do is go through some slides you sent me, and you can talk about the autograph collection as much as you like, but just give us a little background on yourself, and then we'll start on the slides. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Kyle. I am from Columbus, Ohio. I was originally born up in Delaware. Delaware, Ohio happens to be where Branch Rickey went to law school at Ohio Wesleyan. He went back in the early O's. I think it was like the early or late 1900s. So either it was before the 20s, before the 10s, 1908, I think. We'll just call it 1908. Well, Branch lived here in Delaware for a while, and he ended up moving out east, out to Brooklyn, and became part owner of the Dodgers, which then long term ended up integrating baseball. I think it all started when I was really young, and I started playing some of the old PlayStation games with some of the players, or baseball games with some of the baseball players. There was a Cooperstown team that had a whole bunch of great players on it. My dad and I always used to watch baseball. The Cleveland Indians were what we watched particularly. And I remember Stan Musial would hit home runs every single time he came up to bat. And I was never able to get such consistency out of anybody else. So he became my favorite player. And I used to do chores around the house, just random little things. And my parents give me $20 here, $20 there. And I saved all that money up. And I asked my dad, because eBay had just been coming around. I think this was I had been around for a long time, but it started coming around to me. I asked my dad if I could make a purchase on a Stan Musial baseball. And that was it. From there, I was hooked. And then my dad started encouraging me. My mom loved it too. They saw it as an investment thing.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw it as an investment thing. It was always something of completing a goal. And when I started to get so many, I think it was about, by the time I was 13, I think I had about 40. And all it was Christmases stopped being toys. Birthdays stopped being anything you'd think a kid would get. It was just index cards, 8x10s, and baseballs. That was all I was getting. And over the course of about 6 years or so, until I started working, I was just getting baseballs and signed autographs that way. I started working, and then I had to get a car, started working on getting my own place, all kinds of things that, kind of distract you while you're growing up. Uh, I finally settled back in during COVID, and I was had some time off. I got really sick with COVID, and it kind of made me stop and think, what was it that I enjoyed the most about this entire thing in my life? What was the
Yeah.
one thing? That's right, the stuff that's still on the walls. Well, we've got some work to do.
Yeah.
And it just continued from there. And then it was over the last like 2 years or so, I think I've added like close to 100. And
Go ahead. The thing that takes me about it is that it's a very common kind of story about collectors, is that you start something when you're very young, and I'm talking, I'm sort of analogizing this to baseball card collectors. Is you go through it, and this was my experience when I was absolutely insane about baseball cards for about 5 years when I was a kid, and then I grew out of it, and then I grew back into it
yep.
when I was like, I don't know, 15, 16. And then I went to college, and then things changed. And then I got back into it when I had a nephew who was also really into it. He was like 6, 7 years old. So I got back into it my own way. So I went from that to being out of the hobby. And then it wasn't COVID. I sort of pushed back on this a little bit with me. I actually got back into it, interestingly enough, because I wanted to complete that 1970 set that I was never able to complete. And so that got me back into it. And it's circa 18. And the TTMs, I was crazy with TTMs. I used to send out like 10 a day. and then ultimately, COVID hit. So COVID actually hurt my collection
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it put me in a situation where I couldn't really TTM anymore. So great story. Did you go away to college?
No, no. So I graduated
Okay.
high school here in town and just continued working. I moved to South Carolina for a little bit. I worked from home for a while, and then I moved back up here about 5 years ago. Kind of did some jobs and just continually worked every single day, put away some money. And then when COVID happened, I was just kind of in kind of like a time off of work part. I think I was off for like 2 or 3 weeks or so, and I just thought, man, what was the one thing I enjoyed? And that was all I needed. That was all I needed was 2 or 3 weeks of just nothingness to get you going again. It's
Yep.
crazy. It's the
Yep.
last thing I ever expected to start doing again.
Did you do you deal at all? Can you offset the cost of buying stuff by like upgrading or something like that? Or is that not something you can do?
So it's funny is I've only sold a couple of things and I never make any money on it because I've found that I am kind of an addict and I will always pay the highest amount. And
Okay.
it's just to make sure that I get it, but I don't ever sell these things. It's kind of funny when I make the decision to make a purchase, I decide that's what I'm going to have for the rest of my life, and I can live with this item forever.
Well,
So
you're
it's
on the right show because this is the collector show. I collect. I do sell cars, but mostly it's stuff that comes to me in lots. I keep the stuff that I need for my collection, and I sell the other stuff. So I do sell and sort of offset the costs of what I'm doing.
yeah.
But yeah, I've sort of overpaid for stuff over the years. But this is a collector show, not an investor show. So you're on the right show. Anyways, let's get to. Let me see if I
That
can
doesn't
go
mean we
back.
don't get good deals sometimes, though. We definitely do
That
get good deals.
that's my
Some,
stuff. Oh, I went too fast. That's my last one. Okay. So this is the room you're in now, right?
yep, just here on the whatever side this is. I guess is my
Okay.
left.
Uh Kind of I mean, I think the first time I saw this photograph, I said, "Oh, this is kind of breathtaking. This is like the money shot." So, um let's just and I mean, obviously it's pretty awesome and congrats on what you got going here because it is breathtaking. So let me know a little bit about what's here in this photograph and the sort of big one, and then we'll go through some other ones.
All right. So I'm gonna have to kind of turn around here, but I look at this wall every single day, and I sometimes forget because there's just so much on the wall. You've got things like I've got a nice Mickey Mantle induction card that's an 8x10. Joe DiMaggio. You got Chuck Klein. I think it was a 38 Phillies. I think it might have been 38 Phillies
Hmm.
um, album page that was cut. That's the one on the right in the smaller black 8x10 frame with the two
Okay.
photos. To the left of that, you've got Frank Home Run Baker. That's on a what is that? A 1957 Cooperstown, New York Doubleday Field Hall of Fame game scorecard. It's also signed by Warren Giles and Shag Crawford, and I think there's one other guy on there it's somebody who I don't know, just happens to be on it. And then next to that, you've got the Al Simmons 1933 Comiskey Park scorecard, and then you got Eddie Collins. Below here is Billy Southworth. He's actually buried in Columbus. I've been to his grave several times.
Billy Southworth is interesting to me that you bring up that name because he's the manager of the 1948 Braves,
Yep.
and I have a 1948 Braves collection that I'm going to do a show on in the future. And Southworth is kind of one of the last cards that I need to get. So he doesn't have that many cards. That's the problem,
Yeah,
and it's hard
yeah.
to find. But anyway, so go ahead. I'm sorry, I
Oh, you're
interrupted you with
fine.
that.
Then I got like Jim Bottomley on an album page. He's the one down there with the 4 cards inside of it. And then you've got down below Billy Southworth, you got a Willie Wells, and you got two Willie Wells. You've got one that's a pre-stroke before he had a stroke. And like you said, a lot of these guys have health conditions or strokes or things that just impact them where their signatures, their brains more than anything.
Yeah.
And I think it tells the story of what I've always believed, that an autograph is not necessarily just your legal interpretation of your name. It's genuinely your personality, the way you perceive yourself, the way you just present yourself to everybody else and say, this is how my autograph looks. I'm proud of this. And like you said, a lot of those guys take a lot of pride in it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true penmanship when you stop and look at these things, and it just blows you away. But I think probably one of the cooler things in the entire room is you'll see that baseball hanging off the side of the wall there.
Yep.
And that is a 1965 Yogi Berra baseball. But the coolest thing about it was hit by Yogi at an old timers game. It was a guy named Joseph Webb. It was a fan that caught the ball, and he mailed a letter off to Shea Stadium and said, I caught a foul ball you hit on Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium. I would like to know if you'd be able to autograph it for me. Thank you very much. Let me know where to send it. Your fan, Joseph Webb. And Yogi Berra wrote back on Mets letterhead, in answer to your letter on August 5th, I would suggest you send the baseball to Shea Stadium. I'll be happy to autograph it for you. Thank you for your interest and support, Yogi Berra. And that ball's up there, and that's the ball. That's probably one of my favorite things. And
so 1965, Berra, who had managed the pennant-winning 1964 Yankees, and then they fired him because he lost the World Series. He signed with the Mets as a player coach.
Yep.
It's his last baseball card, 1975. It's 65. I'm sorry. So he came in and started playing, and I guess he wasn't good. His number of at bats for the Mets is like less than 20, I think. And then I think he voluntarily retired in May. Yeah. So if he was in the Old Timers game, it was in the Old Timers game in 1965. He would have played in the season and in the Old Timers game. That's kind of a Yogi thing, though. Yogi's like the Zelig or the what's the Tom Hanks character who is in everything? Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump of baseball, because he's in so many different things, and he was in the game from like the 40s to like the 90s. So he's it's funny, but that's a great story that the guy caught the ball, sent it. And Yogi was nice enough to write that letter back. So that is a great one.
That's
To the right of the ball, there's a photograph. A black and white framed photograph. Looks like about 5 guys in there. What is that?
Oh, yeah. That's a Roy Campanella. It's a post-stroke. Not post-stroke, post-accident. It's got Sal Magli, Don Drysdale, and Roy Campanella with I saw that. I think it might be Dressen. I don't know the Dodgers coaches particular. It's an older gentleman. And they're hoisting Magli up. I think it's when he threw his no-hitter.
Oh, yeah. The coach is, Jimmy, what the heck? I forget. He was the first base coach, older guy. And,
older guy.
Yeah, I've come across his name a couple of times. So
it's one of those names. It's another one of those things where you just, with all these names, it's like trying to remember 500 of your best friends' names.
Exactly.
You're bound to lose one of them.
So I think this is the back, a little bit further in the back. So we've got there's a picture that's held up. I'm pointing at it. You obviously can't see what I'm pointing at, but it's a black and white photograph with 2 guys. One guy's holding a bat.
Yep. So that's a Ted Williams. It's a newspaper clipping. He's there with Stan Musial, and on the back side of it, it's got I think it's got a cigarette ad on the back of it. So it just adds to it. I love the old stuff that's got cigarette ads on it and alcohol ads. And it's just funny because I don't think either of those guys smoked. So it's just kind of a funny thing. They did have advertisements back then of them smoking, but I don't think Stan or Ted ever smoked. At least not that I know.
Ted might have, but Stan definitely did not. I actually have seen this in recent months. We have the group that I do a lot of dealing with on Twitter, actually. One of the Stan Musial super collectors is in there, and he's going to be on the show. Probably, it might even be next week.
That's great.
And he recently got an item that was in fact a Stan Musial cigarette ad, and the thing was the backstory is that Stan didn't smoke at all. I mean, he took great care of himself. He played until like the age of 42 or 43, whatever it was, but. So that is they had advertised for things that they didn't.
I'm pretty sure it's the old Chesterfield or the Chester.
Yeah.
I think it's a Chesterfield ad. It's because it's kind of a ghastly looking image actually, because you can tell that he didn't want to put that cigarette in his mouth. I've seen the image. It's just funny.
So the thing that strikes me about this one is the number of balls, and we're going to look at a little closer a few balls, but you've got, I don't know, 50 balls maybe there. I don't know. I can't count them
It,
out.
it's something like that. It's a small army, and it's actually kind of become a nuisance. Baseballs to me aren't really the. See, I've got my preferred displaying technique is flats or index cards. I love just being able to have an image of somebody. The baseballs kind of make it a little difficult because then you can't, like how I've got everything one by one by one by one with photos, baseball
Right.
cards, tunneling cards. It just helps you identify who a player is. These just make it a little bit more difficult, and you have to like know the person's face in your head, or you just don't have something to relate it to. Unless you're a baseball fan like us, and you already know who they are.
Yeah.
But you've got everybody. I've got like 8 Willie Mays baseballs up there, and I got I think it's a 45 Boston Red Sox ball that's signed by Ted Williams on a sweet spot, and
Nice.
49 Indians ball with Satchel Paige and Lemon, Wynn, Joe Gordon, Doby, Luke Easter, Bill McKechnie's on it. That's one of my newer pieces. I love that thing. It's
an Indians item without Feller on it, or Feller's got to be on it, right? Didn't he sign everything?
He signed everything. I was looking at it and I couldn't find it. So I don't know. I was over the ball like 10 times. I think Bob's on it, but it might be one of those ones that's kind of he might have signed it and somebody signed over his name, so it's kind of
the old joke about Feller is that at one point later in his life it became harder to find baseball cards without Bob Feller's signature on it than the ones that.
That's very true. And the most disgusting part about it is you'll still see very rarely, because people know not to, or people that I guess that were faking them just know not to fake them. But people were still out there trying to sell forged Bob Feller autographs. And that's one of the funniest things because they're very rare when you see them. But when I see them floating around on either it's Twitter or Reddit, because I do follow or it's on Facebook, I do follow a Facebook out or safe thing. And it's very rare. It's very rare. But most of the time, it's just to post that fake Bob Feller and say, hey, we found one. It's like finding a rainbow carp or something in like in Alaska. It's like finding an alligator in Alaska. You'll just never find it. But they exist. It's crazy.
So throw me some more names on those balls back there, because I'm enjoying this.
You've got Schneider, Marichal, Fingers, Palmer, Gwynn, Smith, Puckett, Sparky Anderson, Pete Rose. Met him when I was a kid. Bob Gibson. You got a Kurt Flood. I think it's an 83 Cardinals ball. I think it's an 83.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of that. It's got Gibson on it. Al Habrowski, Kurt Flood.
Flood is tough because
he is.
I do not have the 1970 signed by Flood. He's one of the players I don't have, and I actually lost out on an auction about, I don't know, maybe a year ago, which was frustrating because I have never seen a Kurt Flood 70 signed card until then, and it was just the price went crazy near the end of the auction. So, I mean, so let me ask you a question. You did mention some modern guys there, not modern, but guys that are still alive, played during my lifetime. I've gone to multiple baseball card shows because I collect cards, but also occasionally there'll be a guy from the 70s set that I don't have, like when I went to the National and I got Bench and Perez on the same day. Do you go to shows like card shows or other shows where there were people signing and pay the exorbitant prices that they're asking for?
So believe it or not, no. I've only ever met Archie Griffin, OSU, I think running back. I happened to be at the Kroger when they grand opening the Kroger. That's how they get people into Kroger's and grocery stores here. Say, hey, remember that Ohio State receiver? Oh, we'll have him come in. So I have him, but I lost that. I think I gave it to my brother. Pete Rose. I met Pete Rose about 10 years ago or so. No, it was longer than that. It was a while ago. And that's it. I wanted to go to the National this year, ended up blowing it off. And then, that's it. I don't even go to card shows. I think my Hank Aaron came from the local antique mall up in Delaware. And
So let's move on to the next slide. But now we're
Yeah.
in the single players. But before we get into that, the buying versus having a TTM or having the guy sign it in front of you. Authentication is always an issue with autographs, and I'm not a, a a real believer in autograph experts as like a science, so to speak. So for me, the best way to know that something is authenticated is that the player signed it in front of me, and I have a photograph of the player signing the actual card. In
Yep.
fact, one of them, Jim Perry, the picture, Gaylord Perry's brother, actually held the card up next to himself because he was like he was into the idea that I was authenticating it. And it's like, you pay more money to JSA is like 20 feet away from where they sign, just so that they can authenticate something that I think is more authentic. The fact that I have a photograph of the player signing the actual card.
Yep.
And then the TTM stuff, which, like I said, the Hall of Fame guys, I legitimately believe are signing. But some of the cards that I have, I don't know. I mean, is it maybe their brother's, the son, the guy's 85 and the son who's 60 signed it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And, the old the secretarial signatures, like Babe Ruth has potential issues with that. And, so how do you feel about, I mean, what's your approach to authentication is really the question here.
So I'm really happy you asked that. So authenticate, because I've had every single time I talk about any of this, because it's not like card collecting. You obviously can have unauthentic cards and authentic cards, and people can still fake stuff either way. Wherever the money's at, people are still going to try to abuse that. So
Yep.
The thing about authentication is, and I've been doing this more in depth over the last 5 to 6 years, or probably about 3 years than I ever have. Just PSAFacts.com is very, very, very good at noting a large collection of signatures from a certain player. And let's say something crazy like a Derek Jeter autograph. Derek Jeter is one of the most forged autographs. He's like up there with Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays of having the most forged signatures ever.
Right.
You go to PSAFacts.com, and it's literally PSA DNA's database for where they would compare autographs to a sample that they would get to then authenticate. If it matches either the flow, the slants, it's kind of a crazy thing to describe, but if you were to sign your own name 1,000 times, and if somebody was to present you your autograph, but you didn't sign it, but you slid it in with 1,000 other autographs, would you be able to find the one that you did not sign?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you've got to really pay attention and make sure that everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to. Now, that also then comes into games where it's, is it properly signed? Is the guy older? You've got all these periods. So you have to have these huge databases of just autographs. And there are a lot of characteristics from a lot of these guys that sign their names certain ways. Like there's a umpire named Nestor Shilak, who he was a signer who would sign things in a billion different ways. Willie Mays had the same thing. Nestor Shilak always signed his name kind of crooked. And a lot of the forgeries that you'll see, they sign them more bland, as if it was like print. So you've got all of these Willie Mays. I mean, I remember trying to find my first Willie Mays baseball, and the PSA DNA ones, you were looking at them, you're like, what? Are these real? And even PSA passed some fake Willie Mays baseballs, 2 years ago. And it's actually insane. And that also has been a huge credibility problem for me. Is I know what is fake. I know what is no good. There are a couple of things that kind of always make you go, Clubhouse people, they would sign baseballs, the wives, the sisters. And that's where we kind of get into the modern day problems where, and I'm going to call them out, JSA, I believe, is probably one of the most crooked when it comes to authenticating things. And I mean that. It's because they authenticate sister autographs. I've seen them authenticate Joe DiMaggio's sister's autograph. I've seen them authenticate Rogers Hornsby's girlfriend's autograph, Red Faber's wife's signature, Grover Cleveland Alexander's wife's autograph, Joe Jackson, for God's sakes, they authenticated Joe Jackson's wife's autograph. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of fraudulent memorabilia that is not. This isn't like it's a baseball card that's signed by Tony Oliva that cost me $15 and JSA got it wrong. We're talking about a $1,200 index card that is not signed by the right person, and you're going to still charge it premium because JSA said it's right. That's a problem for me, but I think that's where you go and you look and you research, and a lot of these ones that are authenticated by JSA sit and sit and sit because the real collectors know it from the get-go.
Right.
And a lot of these guys who have these wife sister signatures, they'll sit, and then once one collector comes in that's maybe new to the hobby who wants to get these bigger autographs that are just kind of sitting around that happen to be sister autographs, they buy them, they get stuck with them. So I've always found that is a big problem where, but there's examples like Red Faber's autograph. I'll grab it down here really quick because I think this is a good thing to talk about is Red Faber's autograph and his wife's signature. I actually went out and found his wife's autograph and his autograph. I don't know how well that'll come through, but his wife's autograph is on the very top, and you can see it's kind of bubbly. And Red Faber, his actual signature on the bottom is more blocky.
Nice.
So it's
bring it up there. So you're okay. Oh, that's much better.
Here we go. So
she's a pretty good forger.
She is. And the craziest thing about it is this one, the top one is not JSA. The bottom one is Beckett. But I have seen, I can't tell you how many JSA JSA letter of authentication letters that just state, hey, this is a real Red Faber signature.
Right.
And it's not. It's not.
I see what you're saying, that it's more sort of, not flowery, but more sort of.
That's the way I see it too. Is like it's more of honestly a woman's signature. And Edna Stengel used to do it too. Edna Stengel used to do it too for Casey. It's just a common practice, and they say it's non-malicious, but as a collector, sometimes it feels malicious. But of course, you got to remember when people were getting these autographs back in the day, they weren't necessarily collecting them for either monetary value. They wanted them just to have them because they loved the player. So it didn't really matter in their brain.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Uncle Jimmy collection. Uncle Jimmy was like a guy who died in, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago. He was in his 90s and never married, but he had a incredible collection of cards from the Gaudi cards, the 1933 and 34 Gaudi. He actually he's like the original TTM guy. And so he had, and they auctioned off the Wheatland auctions in Pennsylvania. I think they're in Pennsylvania. Wheatland auctions did like 4 in a row of Uncle Jimmy stuff. And, the cards themselves, I got a few of the cards, but I didn't get any of the autographs. Because, an autographed 1933 Gaudi, they were going for, $5,000, $10,000, even like, minor Hall of Famers. But that's kind of like what he was doing it, not so that his ancestors or his descendants could make millions of dollars, but he was doing it because he was a kid and he was a fan.
Right.
I mean, that's it. When one of the things, one of the cynical things about people getting autographs these days is when sometimes you see a kid getting the autograph of a player and the father is like 10 feet behind and the player's like knows it's not for the kid. This 3-year-old kid or 4-year-old kid doesn't know who Ronald Acuna is, but the dad knows his signature's worth a couple $100, so or whatever. It's like that's like the worst scenario of what you're talking about.
It's literally the doomsday scenario for modern day autograph collecting. I think it's one of the reasons why Mariano Rivera is very approachable, but like Derek Jeter, you can never get a hold of him. Yeah. There's a lot of these guys that also understand the economics to their signature, because if they can sell tickets to say, hey, I'm going to sell a whole bunch of autographs, they can still sell them for $200-$300 a ticket versus, somebody who's flooded the market. Like, I don't know, I can say like White Hoyt. I think White Hoyt, Bill Terry, those two Hall of Famers, early win, Bob Feller, for God's sakes. I mean, you look at these players that would just sign for free, or most of the time just sign for like $5. And that's about what their autographs are worth still, because you go on eBay and you look up Bill Terry autograph and you've got, not even kidding, 900 autographs to choose from.
Yeah.
It's
I actually collect Bill Terry cards,
yeah.
and I have a bid in on an autographed photo. I don't remember which auction it is. It might even be it's either Collector Connection or REA, and I'm shocked at how low the price is. I'm like, holy shit, this is Bill Terry. Like, this would fit nicely into my collection, but now I know why.
Yeah.
And I know, well, Wade Hoyt was around the game for a very long time. He was a player for 20 some odd years with a bunch of different teams. And then he was an announcer with, I think it was the Reds for like decades. And then he was inducted in the Hall of, like a lot of these guys who were good players and then didn't get elected to the Hall of Fame. And then they became announcers and they were always in people's ears, like Ron Santo and Phil Rizzuto. Not to say that they didn't deserve it, because I think they did. But a guy like Wade Hoyt, he didn't get elected to the Hall of Fame until like 1969 or something. And he signed like crazy. And I did this because I actually got gifted a signed Wade Hoyt, the Hall of Fame plaque. And I know I saw you have some of them.
I do.
I couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
The Hall of Famer from like played in the 1920s and 30s, and I think I sold it for like $15.
Yeah.
It's like,
and
whatever.
Do you remember how long it sat for?
A couple of months, maybe.
A couple of months, yeah. I mean, it's.
I'm one of those people that I don't I don't hold out for the highest bidder kind of thing, because I constantly need to move cards and I need to move these items because I'm funding purchases of other things. But anyway, so we got this picture up on the screen next to us we haven't talked about yet. That's Eddie Collins on the no, that's Mickey Cochran on the left there.
Right? That's Mickey Cochran. Yep.
Awesome.
I think I don't remember the year on it. I think it was I think it's I know it's a press pass. It was a press pass for Bert Patel. Padel. I don't remember how you pronounce his last name, but I believe it's Bert Padel. Some press corps guy ended up running into him, and that's a JSA authentic. That's one of the larger Mickey Cochran signatures I've seen, because most of the time he signed his name really small. And I don't know if this was, I don't remember the year off the top of my head, if it was pre or post smack in the head, but he was one of the guys that got smacked in the head by a baseball. And he almost got Ray Chapman. I mean, he was like, went out blind and they had to carry him off the field. And there's a whole story about him.
Yep.
And then
it's a middle photograph. There's a little
glare, very bad glare.
But who is that?
That's Gabby Hartnett. So I've got Gabby Hartnett, and then below him is Ray Schalk. So I try to keep a couple of the catchers together.
Catchers together, yeah.
Yeah, just try to keep a couple of the dead baller, or not really necessarily dead ballers, but the early 20s, 30s guys together.
And then to the right, there's two guys in suits, or three guys in suits, or two guys and a wife. Who is that?
So that is that photo, the photograph, the black and white photograph, is Casey Stengel on the left, Edna Stengel in the middle, and then I can't remember the name of the guy. It's the mayor. It's
Mayor of New York.
Mayor of Glendale, California, which is where he lived. They gave him the key to the city. But
nice.
what's cool about that? That's a Type 1 or Type 2. I don't really remember, but it dated October 17th, 1949. But that's a photograph from then with, the three of them. But I've actually got Casey's signature down there in the bottom, and I happened to find an Edna Stengel autograph there above it, and it's signed Mrs. Casey Stengel, just filling in for Casey, New York Yankees, June 18th, 1957.
So the October of 49 is important for Casey Stengel, because that would be the first Yankee World Series that he managed. I know 49 was the first of their 5 in a row. So October, that would have been right after he won the 49 World Series. There's a very big, below the photograph with Stengel, and I see there's an old Stengel player photo in there, but below that there's a very large, I guess it's not an index card because it's too big for an index card. Signature below that. Who is that?
I think it's a government postcard. It is a government postcard. It's got all the postmark lines on it. It's a Larry McPhail or Larry McPhail. It's executive position, Hall of Famer. I've got the same deal. Like I always kept in my mind, like the Tinkers Evers to Chance
Of
kind
course.
of thing.
Yeah.
So that one I've always had like I've always had these things in my brain where it's like Larry McPhail, Tom Yawkey, same person, and then
Right.
like Gary Heilman and Herb Pennock, same person in my brain. Just weird little things like Zach Wheat, Sam Rice, where I've got them together, and
Yeah.
it's kind of funny to me because I'm constantly thinking of these names that just nobody. Who in the world thinks of Larry McPhail on a Wednesday? Nobody does. Thinks of Tom Yawkey. This guy.
I think of weird people, weird baseball people all the time. So
Yeah.
you're preaching to the choir here.
I love it when my parents come up because I was telling you at the beginning, my dad, was so encouraging of all this, and now he sees it as like some kind of, Kyle, why are you buying this stuff? You don't even know who these guys are. I'm like, yeah, I kind of do. I mean, you read about him and you go, oh, cool, yeah, that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. But the whole
that's kind of one of the themes of this channel.
yeah,
Is that we'll talk about players, and there are great stories behind them, and I like to do the research before the show where I do a little, a little deep dive into some stuff, and it makes the card come to life. It makes the photograph, the autograph, it makes them come to life, and suddenly you're reading about these players. I did a show, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it's probably my least popular show, about Mike Donlin, who was a dead ball era guy on the Giants, but he was like a crazy person, and he also like went into Hollywood and stuff. And I'm like reading this guy's story. It's like a movie.
yeah.
It's like it should be a Hollywood movie, and that to me makes the whole thing incredibly interesting. So thinking about obscure players and then reading about them, it actually is kind of cool. It's like drunk history. So
It is. I like the guys that went to war because I'm also a
oh yeah,
guy. I love that. So like Yogi Berra, like charging the bunkers on D-Day. I think he was at Gold Beach. I mean, Hank Greenberg, a Jewish man fighting against the Nazis. I mean, it's stories that's why the gallery is such a big thing to me. Is I want to make it a thing because I'd love for people to come in and see all these people because at the Cooperstown, I've been there before. You walk in, you get little bits and tid pieces about what things are, but to get the individual story of every person, not where you're spending all day looking at a Hank Greenberg autograph and going, oh yeah, he was in the war, cool, but to just have this mass information intake to your brain of every single person and going, God, these were all people, not just baseball players, they were people. And that's how it gets out of hand sometimes because you try to remember all this information about Larry McPhail. Who was he? I don't know. I'm too busy thinking about how Luke Sewell only had 174 strikeouts over 12,000 at bats or something. It's
yeah. All right, so let's see what we got here. Are we on? We're on 9. Okay, so we're at 43 minutes and we're on 9. So we gotta move a little bit.
Gotta get it going. I know you.
So I think that's Tony Lazzari on the right, and I assume that's a Tony Lazzari signed ball. But who's the other ball there?
So that's the Lazzari ball is a 38 Cubs ball, and then the one on the left is I think we've nailed it down to 1923 Washington Senators baseball. It's Chicago. I can't remember. It's Chicago White Sox. I always want to say Senators, but it's Chicago White Sox.
Right.
Yeah, it's got Ed Walsh and it's got his son on it too. So senior and junior were both on that ball. So he only played a couple of years. Junior did. Senior would have already stopped playing. And they retired 23 or 28. I can't remember the years. But it's
Faber. Is Red Faber on that? Because he was on the White Sox around that time.
He was, and that was he was, and Schalk was on there too.
Right.
There's a couple of really big players there on the White Sox team, and obviously after the Black Sox scandal, a lot of those guys were shifted around, or a lot of those guys were banned, obviously, but some of the players that were still around were just absolved onto other teams.
Oh, wonderful. Here. Okay, so you got the Branch Rickey, which is very important. And of course, Branch Rickey's greatest achievement behind him. Is that the ball there signed by Jackie?
So that ball is a 50s Dodgers ball. I still haven't had it. I was going to go to the National this year with one sole purpose, to take that ball up there to PSA and have them look at it because I don't want anybody else looking at it. I was talking with you a little bit earlier about the brow, and there's this old bat boy, Giancarlo. It was Joey Giancarlo or Charlie Giancarlo. He was a bat boy for the Dodgers back in the 50s, and he would sign baseballs all day long. That was his only job, was just to sign baseballs to give to fans. So they would essentially fake a whole bunch of baseballs to fill the supply issue or the demand problem with a whole bunch of just a supply of just garbage. So what I have is a baseball that is from a gentleman who got it at Ebbets Field back in the 50s at the time and had the ball for a long time. He ended up getting, when he had his kids and he started talking to his kids about what the ball meant to him, the guy told me I got it on eBay, and the guy told me he couldn't remember exactly who his dad told him was on the ball, but he remembered how much the ball meant to him, and that the ball was like his most sacred thing he owned, and it was on his nightstand next to him every single day. Yeah, it never left his sight. So, of course, like most people do, when the dad dies, they sell a bunch of their most favorite things because that's a modern day problem solving thing. So he sold it to me for next to nothing, which again blows me away. These people do this. I got the ball, got out of the box, had my gloves on because I always wear my white gloves, and I'm looking around, and I turned because I bought it because I saw Campanella, and I thought, well, holy moly, that'd be pretty cool to have a Campanella ball. And I turned it around, and I was looking at it, I was like, whoa, is that Jackie Robinson? And my heart fell out of my chest. What are we talking about? And I looked at it again, took a picture of it with the flash on and zoomed in and looked. I was like, God, that looks a lot like Jack. And then I noticed above it, there was a Sandy Koufax signature. In the middle is Sandy Koufax. And if you look at the roster, they only played for a couple months together. And it was at the very last year of Jackie Robinson's career. So there's a good chance that this ball is signed right before Jackie, exited baseball. Sandy Koufax is entering baseball, and Roy Campanella is just about to have his accident. This is like a big ball, but it's got two Jackie Robinsons on it. It's got a top one that looks like a brow signature, one of the Clubhouse Boys signatures, and then it's got a signature smack dab in the middle that I've been looking at. I was looking at it again last night. I probably looked at this ball more than anything else I've ever looked at in my life. And I'll be ashamed if it comes back not good, because I'll put my whole integrity behind it. That's a good Jackie, and it's not a signed by Pee Wee. It's not a signed because it's got Gil Hodges and Reese and Orinsky. It's got all these autographs that when you look at it, you go, wow, those look really good. I don't know. So I'm going to have to just get it taken. I don't count it in my checklist. I still have Jackie Robinson in my checklist for that reason.
Right.
That's just how it sits at the time. But Branch Rickey, obviously, again, want to open up a gallery here in Delaware, just dedicated to him and his name, and have people come in and learn about Branch, why he meant so much to not just baseball, but the country, and, just bring a little bit more light to him. I think of everybody, the world that we live in, we always want to appreciate the people that made life easier for everybody. And Branch, I think, is one of those people that never gets the love, unless you're at Cooperstown or, you watch stuff on YouTube about him, or Branch, Jackie Robinson Day always gets brought up, the movie 42, but you don't have anything physical to go to pay respect to the man, aside from his gravesite that's, 80 miles from my house. So it's...
Branch Rickey also intersects with Roberto Clemente.
Yep, with Roberto Clemente as well. So he just hit about every single one of them. He really did. He was
although he traded away when he was the GM for the Cardinals, he traded away Mize.
He did.
On my Johnny Mize show, I kind of took Branch Rickey to task for, but he certainly made up for that in later years.
Yeah. He also made the farm system and kind of ran Connie Mack out of business just about, and he's a very important guy. That's a Lefty Grove.
Clicked over to Lefty Grove, who I think his signature is as beautiful as his throwing motion. That's a PSA DNA there. That's good. That's I'm a big Lefty Grove supporter. I think he's underappreciated. Oh, nice.
There she is in the flesh. But it's...
So how'd you get that one?
I actually got it from a charity. I got it from a I can't remember the name off the top of my head. All I know that it was a charity. Most of the proceeds for the purchase of this went to charity, and It was another one of those eBay. Oh, Joshua Tree charity auctions, I think is what
Oh,
it was.
nice.
So they ended up having this. Somebody had given it to him for some funds. Of course, I bought it. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And I wanted it because it was so nice and it was just
Yeah.
constructed so perfectly. And honestly, that photo that's up there on the screen doesn't know justice, and me holding it on the camera here
Well, let
doesn't.
me turn around here. Give me a sec.
I can't ever get a good picture of this thing because I've had it. You got one there?
No, this is
There you go. That's his card, though.
the 1933 Gaudi Lefty Grove. It's his. I guess it's one of his quote unquote rookie cards, but it's
Yep.
probably his most valuable card. It is a. I think it's a 1.5. No, it's a 2 miscut. Which honestly, I don't see the miscut. It's a little off center, but I really, really love this card, and I got it at such a good value because of the MC notification
Yeah, the miscut.
notation. So this is one of those cards that I kind of chased for a while. I had his 34 for a while, but I wanted the 33. So anyway, let's go back to. There we go. Okay, so lefty. Okay, so this is the left side's Jimmy Fox, and the right side is that wonderful looking scorecard that I saw on the wall there. So tell me about the one on the left first.
So that one is a 1935 Athletics signed page, and that's got Jimmy Fox and Connie Mack on it. Those were the two most important names when I made the purchase. Was I just really liked having Jimmy Fox and Connie Mack on the same piece.
Yep.
I'm not really a big fan of the single sign stuff. I mean, I am. Obviously, I am. But it's just when I can get a team sign document that looks like that, that makes my entire – it just makes me happy. But the backside of it, the backside of that page actually had the bench coach's signature, and he was the guy who got everybody to sign that. He was a fan that wanted it, and I actually have the original envelope from that. And it's got a postmark on it from – what is it, 42 McLay Street or McLay Ave in Philadelphia. It's actually was shipped from the ballpark.
Nice.
So I've got the original envelope for it. It's not the last frame it'll ever be in. That'll be in a frame or displayed out and about so people can see it. But with the envelope, it's pretty cool. It's got the little purple postmark on it, and I like that piece a lot.
Fascinating to me. And then on the right, it's at a score. Yeah, it says official scorebook of Comiskey Park.
Yep.
That is an awesome piece.
So that's the 1933 Al Simmons, Jimmy Dykes piece. I actually that was my first purchase through Heritage Auctions, and it was it's probably one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten off their site. I actually ended up winning a couple things from the Lou Brock estate, and they're massive photos, huge photos. But I love Heritage. I love eBay. I love Hunt Auctions. A lot of those auction houses just provide you with some of the nicest stuff. And I'd love to work for them. I'm not saying I want to come work for them tomorrow. I would love to have a job there because it'd be like working at Disney World.
My friend Dylan, who started out as just a baseball card guy on Twitter, started doing the Wednesday thread, and he got more popular. And now I think he has more followers than I do. And I have a lot of followers from not baseball stuff.
Yeah. PWCC, I think he works for now, right?
He now works for PWCC. And I messaged
very proud of him on that. That's huge.
And I remember when he went through the whole process, he had interviewed with a different organization. Then he got an interview with PWCC because we knew one of our other friends got assigned there. And then ultimately it worked out. I think he did like 3 or 4 interviews. But anyway, so keep hope alive because it's something that does happen. And I think it's smart. I mean, PWCC hiring Dylan is such an incredibly good move.
It's genius.
Because he's one of my favorite guys. He's just like such a cool guy. He's the
most genuine person I've ever met.
I sat in my car with him and we drove for like an hour to the Philly show. And, we just didn't stop talking about baseball cards the whole time. And it was all information back and forth. Besides being a nice guy, he's also like really knowledgeable about stuff. So I was like, PWCC, do it. Heritage, hire Kyle.
One day. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Okay. This is the last slide. So we're at 54 minutes. Longest show ever. But Let's try to get under an hour here.
We're gonna do
On
it.
the left, Eddie Collins, of course. On the left, Eddie Collins, underappreciated player.
Most,
Definitely,
I think it's the most sacrifice hits of any player of all time. I think he holds the record for that because they had him bunt a lot.
and
I think that's the record.
significantly underappreciated player
Yeah.
is Archie Vaughn on the right. Pittsburgh shortstop, Hall of Famer. So tell me about these two, how you got them, and anything else. I think I see I see one of the Wainers in that yellow poster up there.
Yep. So that's a 74. It's a 74 scorecard with or program with it's got Clemente on it. Which remember, this was 2 years after Clemente had passed, so the
Right.
Pirates were still going through this. But I actually love it because the person right above the Archie Vaughn signature is Archie Vaughn. It's so small, even the Pirates forgot about him. They made him the smallest thing possible. So he always gets so much hate, and I don't understand it. He was 40 years old when he died. He was out fishing on a boat, and that was 1952. So he's one of the most scarce, hard to get autographs. But I think my favorite statistic about all of him altogether, all of it that he's ever done or what was ever said about him, he played Pee Wee football with Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon put him on his all-time baseball team. He put him at shortstop over Wagner, which then brought the Writers Association to say, "Hey, why don't we put Vaughn in the Hall of Fame?"
Well, I'm surprised Nixon didn't get impeached for that.
What do you mean, Vaughn? I also read some. I think he's the 26th most valuable non-pitcher player of all time, or something. It's just insane statistics.
Right.
That if you say that to somebody, they're thinking, "Oh, well, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, all these players that are the best of all time." Archie Vaughn's top 50, and we're talking about 10,000 players. It's crazy to me. People forget him. I forget him. I mean,
there was a Clemente mention in there, and I'm a Clemente collector, and my first guest ever on my show was my friend Kurt, the Clemente Supercollector. So, do you have a Clemente autograph?
So I have no Clemente yet, no Ruth.
Okay.
But the best part about this is I've got 15 autographs left to complete the entire thing. There's about 82 or 90. I have a huge PDF on my phone of just things that you cannot buy, who died before 1920, autographs you cannot buy. So there are, and also things that are just a little too expensive to be practical to open a gallery, like a Roger Connor autograph. That's my favorite player of all time, the first guy ever to hit a grand slam. But, you're talking about a $50,000 autograph. That's more than what's everything I've got. So Clemente, Ruth, Gehrig, and then you get down to like Walter Johnson, Cy Young. Those are like the top 5 number or names that I really need. And then of the rest of them are like random players like Bobby Wallace, Bill Clem, umpires, Sam Crawford. That's another one I've still got to grab. But Elijah Watt and Hornsby, Wagner, Kennesaw. And you just got a bunch of randoms. Robert Moranville. That's all I've got left. It's
Robert Moranville is his cards are weirdly expensive, and I need him to complete my 1914 Braves collection. Another show I'm going to do at some point, but Ruth is problematic because Ruth with baseball cards. There's so many Babe Ruth baseball cards.
a load.
They're not rare cards, but they're so ridiculously expensive. And so I feel like it's probably the same thing with autographs. Like he signed a lot.
He signed. I always say this, that Epirixi signed less autographs than Babe Ruth. His autograph's still $300-400, but it's not $5,000. I mean, Archie Vaughn, for God's sake, same deal. I mean, it's not Babe Ruth money, but there's only 2. Heritage Auctions posted this. They sold a PSA slabbed index card by Archie Vaughn. At the time in 2020, that was the only index card signed by Archie Vaughn, single sign, in the PSA population report. So I don't know if this is number 2, but you got 2 of them. How is that not selling for as much as a Ruth when you got 20,000 Ruths for sale? And Ty Cobb, there's 4,000 checks in the market, and they're all over $4,000 or $5,000 to buy one.
Yeah. So
insane.
I think it's this rarity population versus just everybody wants this. Everybody wants a Babe Ruth card in their collection.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a Babe Ruth autograph. And I feel like that's probably your next one because there's so many of them, but who knows, right?
I'm hoping to get a Clemente next. I'd like to get a Clemente. I figure I'll probably go back to PNC Park and get my Clemente because they did have one there. They were selling them. You know what's funny? You go to baseball games, they actually have the autographs for sale. And
Uh,
PNC was the only place I saw that was selling like Mickey Mantle stuff. But
right.
I remember seeing a Honus Wagner there for like $800, and I still kick myself so hard for not buying it. And then the Clemente was like $1,400. So these are
Right.
prices that are below market value because you obviously have to buy a ticket to get in. But you could drive all the way out there, come home with it, have it up in your wall for cheaper than you would pay for somebody to ship it to your house. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you've got your outlets, but yeah, Clemente is probably next. Ruth, Gehrig. I kind of want to leave Ruth and Gehrig for last, just so I can say, done. It's
Right.
done. But
Right. All right.
hit the hour mark.
I really appreciate you coming on this show. I can't not even imagine how long we could go. We could go for hours.
Yeah.
And I like I said at the outset, I don't have a Hall of Fame autograph collection, but I kind of do because I have this 70 project that I've been doing for years. And
You
there's
do, and that's a gorgeous,
so many
gorgeous.
Hall of Famers in here, but there's like about 300 or so. But it's given me a sort of a connection to the autograph world. I've waited online at the shows with autograph people, and they'll talk their lingo, and it's like it's not that far removed from baseball card lingo, but a tremendous amount of respect for that world, and it's a world, like I said, that I touch every once in a while. But tremendous amount of respect for the amount of effort, time, knowledge, dedication, all the good words that come with you having done what you're doing now. And it's not just admiration for the collection itself, but it's for the appreciation of what the players mean, what the autographs mean, and how important it is that we recognize history, people, not necessarily people. Babe Ruth is great. Everybody knows Babe Ruth, but putting the effort into getting these other players and getting them for people to understand them. And Branch Rickey, of course, is important for a number of reasons. So a tremendous amount of respect for that. But anyway, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really great episode. I hope people stick with us from the beginning to the end because it's worth it. So I'll do some socials on this, and hopefully we can get people to come in and watch this amazing episode. So thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Dan, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Bye-bye.